Tatsinda by Elizabeth Enright, Chapter 1. Once upon a time, far, far away at the top of the world, where it is always cold, there was a mountain that no one knew about except the people who lived on it. The name of the mountain was Tataran, and the people who lived on it were called the Tatarani. Their many-peaked mountain was so large that it was a country in itself. In fact, it was a kingdom. And because it was warmed by deep interior fires, unlike the other mountains in that frozen region, it was green with forests, pasture valleys, orchards, and gardens. It grew up out of the white waste like a great green vessel, a vast, elaborate vessel in full sail, and its warmth caused the surrounding ice to dissolve into a wall of mist many miles thick and very high. But within this circle of barrier mist, the sun shone more often than not, and the land of the mountain prospered and flowered. The king of the Tatarani was named King Tagador, and his wife was Queen Tataspan. Their 3 sons were Prince Taman, Prince Taskin, and Prince Takatan. Prince Takatan was the youngest and most reckless. It would take a year to describe all the strangeness of the mountain. Things that seemed perfectly natural and ordinary to the Tatarani would, from our point of view, be considered very unusual, if not almost unbelievable. It would take many pages, for instance, to describe the creatures of the forest and fields. Only a few can be mentioned, among them the appealing Timtik, a graceful animal with 6 delicate legs, hoofs, and horns made of a substance resembling mother of pearl, a pointed nose like a fox terrier's, and large fan-shaped ears finely fringed along the edges. It had a musical bird-like call, very pleasing to the ear, and was easily domesticated. Though small, it was extremely strong, and every Tatran child had a Timtik to ride to school on. Some of them had 2. There were other creatures, the large, friendly tip-tod, which was prized for its milk, though it looked nothing like a cow, more like a flounder with fur. When it traveled across the pastures, the tip-tod dipped and ruffled along its edges, resembling a carpet propelled by a strong draught. There was the small racing tidwell, highly prized by Tatran children as a pet. It looked something like a squirrel, but could purr like a kitten, and was little enough to fold itself up in a pocket. And then there was the shy, wiry timbertok that skipped along treetops and could fly for short distances. When the moon was bright, it was wakeful, and then one heard it calling in the forest, twanging, rather, since it sounded exactly like the twang of a guitar. The Tatarani called these moonlit nights timbertok nights. All these animals and a dozen others not described had 2 things in common: fur that was as white as snow and names that began with T-I, just as the people all had names that began with T-A. Only among the birds, of which there was a great profusion, would we have recognized some familiar specimens, since these were the only creatures that could come to the mountain from afar and depart at will. No one really wondered where they went. The Tatarani's mountain was sufficient for them. The few who had ever felt curiosity enough to go exploring had perished in the wall of mist. It was known that there were poisons there. As for the trees and flowers and fruits, no, it would take too long to tell about them. It is enough to say that all of them were different from ours, queer, curious, beautiful, different. And the houses of the kingdom were different too, built as they were the clouded crystal mined from the mountain, blue, blue-green, gray, and rose. All their roofs were thatched with the scarlet feathers of timaroon birds, a thatch that lasted forever. The weather never wore it out. Inside of each house on the warm mountain earth, not too warm, just about as warm as your face is to the touch of your hand, there was a toddle. This, which we would call a carpet or a rug, was considered by the Tatarani to be as necessary as we would consider a floor, and every house had one, even the poorest. Each toddle was hand-woven of fine tip-tod fur. All tip-tods were sheared 3 times a year. Colored designs were woven into it, many of them very beautiful, and every family took pride in its toddles. Most of them had one for each season of the year, and many had more. The royal family, for instance, had nearly 100. At the time of my story, the most famous weaver in the kingdom was a young girl named Tatsinda. She had been taught the art of toddle weaving by her foster mother, now dead, and had soon surpassed her in the excellence, originality, and beauty of her design and craftsmanship. King Tagador bought many of her toddles.
"A lucky thing for her, poor girl," he said. "At least she will always have her work, though it certainly is not from pity that I buy it."
Tatsinda was very different from the other inhabitants of the kingdom. She was a beautiful girl, but that was nothing unusual. All Tatran girls were beautiful. The trouble was that her hair was golden and her eyes were brown. No one had ever seen anything like it. All the other Tatarani, the true Tatarani, had glittering white hair like snow crystals, and the eyes of every one of them, without exception, were the color of light shining through ice, a cool greenish blue. That was the way people were meant to look, they thought, and they considered Tatsinda handicapped and were sorry for her because of her golden hair and dark eyes. "Of course, no one will ever marry the poor freak," Queen Tatispan said. "She could do something about her hair, perhaps, bleach it with tip-tod milk or powder it with telltale pollen, but what in the mountain could she ever do about her eyes?"
"Well, she is fortunate in having her work," King Tagador said again. "I must say there has never been a tottle weaver to equal her."
Tatsinda was different in appearance because she was the only person in the kingdom who had not been born there. She had come from somewhere beyond the mists, the only creature but the birds who ever had, and then it was a bird who brought her. One day, 16 years earlier, an old nobleman named Tatsinda had gone hunting in a wild high region of the mountain. All at once he had seen a flight of eagles winging toward him. Tingroks, the Tatarani called them, and in the talons of one, gripped by the cloth of her little cloak, was a baby girl about 2 years old. Old Tatsinda, a splendid huntsman, waited until the eagle was nearly over his head, then, taking careful aim with his todden dart, managed to shoot the bird without touching the child. As she plummeted down, he ran forward and was just in time to catch her in his arms. "And she never cried!" he used to marvel, telling people about this event, as he did for the rest of his life. "She looked at me and smiled and said something in a strange language. Even when she was in the Tikrok's claws, she didn't cry." Tatsinda and his wife, Tabatina, had never had any children, to their sorrow, and when he took the baby home, Tabatina welcomed her with delight, fed her and pampered her, and gave her the name she had been saving for a daughter all these years, Tatsinda, which in the language of the Tatarani means kind and gay. Tatsinda was a bright, intelligent child who already knew many words, not one of which the old couple could understand. She soon learned their language, however, and talked from morning to night as happy children are apt to do. And she was happy. The old couple took good care of her and loved her as if she were their own, in spite of her strange appearance. "I swear I'd just as soon adopt a timber talk, wouldn't you?" one woman said to another at the time. "That dreadful glaring hair, those strange dark eyes, it makes me shudder to look at her. It's terrible to be as sensitive as I am." "Do you suppose they all look like that beyond the wall of mist?" her friend wondered. "If so, I'll keep to the mountain, thank you," said the other. "Not that there's the slightest chance of leaving it." They both laughed happily, thoroughly contented with their life, their kingdom, and their looks. Tabatina could guess how people might talk, of course, and being one of the greatest tottle weavers in the land, determined to teach the art to her foster daughter, so that not only would she know the pleasure of making beautiful and useful things, but also so that she would have a weapon of excellence to protect her all her life. And Tatsinda was a willing pupil. More than willing, she was inspired. "The child has a gift for it," Tabittina said to Taxinaire. "She seems to have been born knowing how to weave."
"Yes, but don't forget she has the finest teacher in all the mountain," Taxinaire reminded his wife. He was very proud of her.
So Tatsinda's life was almost entirely happy. She loved her foster parents and the house they lived in. It was carved of rare crystal the color of peaches. The light that filtered through the walls always seemed warm and comforting, no matter what the weather. She had marvelous toys, a fine timtic to ride on, and 2 little Tidwells for pets. She had her own garden and her own pool where fire-colored tinglefins idled or darted. She had a necklace of torms, stones that turned slowly from green to blue, from blue to purple, from purple back to green. The queen would have been proud to have such a necklace. But sometimes, because of her golden hair and brown eyes, she was unhappy. At school, or talk and tell, as the Tattirani called it, on her first day there, the children had stared at her with open curiosity, and some had teased her so that she was close to tears. It was little Prince Tackatan who came to her rescue. "Stop that!" he commanded angrily. "Is it her fault that she's funny-looking? Can she help it if her hair is yellow? My father and mother say that even now she weaves better toddles than any of the grown-up weavers. And my father and mother are the king and queen," he added, sensing that this boast might be of help, and indeed it was. The children stopped their teasing, and it was not long before they accepted her as one of themselves. Though they considered her to be unfortunate in being different, they grew used to her, grew fond of her, and included her in all their games. As for Tatsinda, she loved Prince Tackatan from that day onward. But as time went by, Tabittina worried increasingly about her foster daughter's future. She would wake in the night and lie worrying. Sometimes she would even wake up Taxinaire so that he could keep her company and worry.
"Now what?" the poor man would groan. "Fretting again about Tatsinda?"
"Yes, I am. We're getting older, Taxinaire."
"Everybody's getting older. Even babies are getting older. Ones that are 2 days old today will be 3 days old tomorrow."
"You know what I mean. We're getting older, and someday we'll die. And then what will happen to Tatsinda?"
"Oh, she'll go on weaving toddles, I suppose," said Taxinaire, yawning wearily. "She'll have this fine house to live in, plenty to eat, work to do. So what is there to worry about? Go back to sleep."
"Yes, but she's 10 years old already. The years will fly by, and I'm afraid that she will never marry, and she will be lonely. Oh, if only she didn't have that hair and those eyes." On and on went Tabittina. Taxinaire had heard it 100 times. Finally, one night, exasperated, he said,
"For pity's sake, then, Tabittina, take your troubles to Tandanan. Ask her advice and let me get some sleep."
Tabittina was silent with surprise, and then she said, "That's just exactly what I'll do. Why in the mountain didn't I think of it myself?"